Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right, we're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go! I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
Hey, friends, this is part 2. So if you haven't listened to the first part, run over there, listen to that, and join us back on this episode. Luma looked relieved that Levi and Ivy were so nice and willing to talk with her. She only hoped now that they could help. "You've landed in a magical land. This forest is my home," began Luma. "It's enchanted, and the fairies, gnomes, and animals that live here are all magic. We've lived here in peace and harmony for thousands of years. But for the last few months, we've discovered that there are creatures that want to take over our land and use it for magic only for themselves." Levi and Ivy leaned in closer to hear every detail. "So is that why we're here?" asked Ivy. "Did you use your magic to create that storm and land our plane here so we could help you?" "That's right," said Luma, looking down. "I'm so sorry, but we didn't know what else to do. The wise wizard that lives here thought someone on the plane could help, and thankfully, as soon as it landed, I saw the good in the two of you. Also, you may have noticed that we put a little frozen spell on everyone else just so we could focus on the two of you. We hope that's okay." "And who is we exactly?" asked Levi. "Follow me," said Luma as she led Levi and Ivy off the plane and into the forest. A large inflatable slide was now attached to the side of the plane to allow Levi and Ivy to get back down to the ground. And as soon as they reached the bottom of the slide, they were surrounded by all different types of creatures. There were other fairies like Luma with glowing skin and animals of every kind. There were gnomes wearing giant hats that covered their eyes, but not their giant smiles. Everyone who Levi and Ivy saw looked friendly and welcoming and also very happy to see them. "Can they help us, Luma?" called out one of the gnomes. "Well, that's up to them," said Luma, reluctant to answer for Levi and Ivy. "Can you help us?" Levi and Ivy then looked at each other, and in an instant, they knew their answer. "We'll try our best, Luma," they said as the crowd that had gathered around them erupted in an applause. "But what do we need to do?" asked Levi. Luma then walked Levi and Ivy over to the edge of a beautiful sparkling river and told them the situation they were in. "As I told you before, our forest home is enchanted, and it's what gives all of us our magic," Luma began. "But our powers have been weakening over the last few months, and that's because a group of mischievous creatures known as the Gleams have come along to take our forest from us. And with that, all of our magical powers. They want to use the forest power for their good only and don't care about the community or honoring the enchanted forest and all the amazing power it holds." "Wow, we're really sorry to hear that," replied Ivy after hearing Luma's story. "Yes, and unfortunately, the only way to get your plane back in the sky and flying is to use our magic," said Luma. "I'm sorry I didn't think of that before I created the storm and brought it down to land here." "So what you're saying is if we don't stop the Gleams, then we're all stuck here forever?" asked Levi. Luma just nodded her head and then showed great excitement, saying, "But I know you two can help us. I felt it as you were flying over our forest. That's why I chose you and brought your plane here." Levi and Ivy knew they had a difficult journey ahead of them, but it was an important one. They had to help Luma and all the fairies and gnomes that lived in the enchanted forest. They were excited and happily joined Luma on her quest to find the Gleams and stop them from stealing the forest's magic. "But what will happen to everyone else on the plane?" asked Levi before they headed off into the forest. "They'll be just fine," answered Luna reassuringly. "When we stop the Gleams, which I know we can, I'll use my fully recharged magic to put your plane back up in the sky. Then everyone aboard will wake up as if they just had the best nap ever. No one will even remember landing here, except you two, of course. And no time will have passed at all. Your flight will still be right on time." Levi and Ivy were happy that their parents and everyone else aboard the plane were safe as they set off to find the Gleams. And it didn't take long before Levi and Ivy knew they were on the right path. It sounded like giggling, and it was getting louder and louder as Levi and Ivy followed Luma down a dimly lit forest trail. It's so strange how the part of the forest where we landed was so bright and colorful, and this part is so dim and dreary, said Ivy. That's because the Gleams have taken almost all the magic from this part of the forest, answered Luma. With the magic goes the light and color. They have been using the forest magic only for themselves, like wishing for anything they want to eat, whenever they want it, or creating toys and games by snapping their fingers, and even wishing for gold and jewels with just the snap of their fingers. Everything Levi and Ivy were hearing just sounded selfish and wrong. It made them want to help Luma and the rest of her forest friends even more now. Why not share all of that with everyone in the forest? Asked Levi. Yeah, why keep it all for yourself? Added Ivy. Especially knowing that it's taking the forest magic and beauty away? That's just wrong. You're very right, said Luma. My friends and I have always used the forest magic to do good. We share everything and never ask for too much. Just to live in this wondrous, enchanted place is our greatest wish. Not food or toys or gold. And as Luma finished talking, that's when they saw it. Levi and Ivy and Luma made their way around a bend in the path and saw where all of the forest magic was going. The light was almost blinding as the magic area was being concentrated into a little spot. And around that spot stood the Gleams, making wish after wish and draining the forest of its magic and power. We wish for more cookies, called out a Gleam creature as cookies rained from the sky and landed on the mountain of sweet treats that already looked to be enough to feed every creature in the forest for years. We want more toys, called out another one of the Gleams as they walked through a sea of toys that had already been wished for and were not even being enjoyed or played with. More gold and jewels for us, called out another group of Gleams as they used the shiny trinkets to skip across a shimmering, brilliant blue lake. Levi and Ivy and Luma couldn't believe what they were seeing. Follow me, whispered Luma as she led Levi and Ivy around the lake and out at the view of the Gleams. Luna told Levi and Ivy to jump on a giant leaf and sailed them over to a floating island where they met another extraordinary character in their marvelous adventure through the enchanted forest. Levi, Ivy, this is Walden. He's a very wise wizard who is as old as the forest itself, exclaimed Luma. He's been working on a way for us to get to the forest back from the Gleams, and that's why we brought you here. Hello, Levi and Ivy, said Walden in a deep voice. It's the power you hold that will help us get our home back. We're all running out of magic, even me. And we need 2 not magic creatures that won't be affected by the power that the Gleams now have. Each day they stay, they weaken us all a bit more. You don't require magic to function, so you're our only hope. Levi and Ivy knew the situation was getting serious after they talked to Walden. After hearing his stories, they said again that they would help in any way they could. Then Ivy had an idea. Can I have a minute to talk with my brother? Asked Ivy. Walden and Luma said absolutely and hoped that they would return with an answer to the problem they had been dealing with. Levi, doesn't this at all remind you of that time in school when Tommy and Katie collected all the recess points and then only used them for the recess activities that they wanted to do? Asked Ivy. Totally, answered Levi. Even though every time someone else in the class got the recess points, they would take a vote and see what activities would benefit the whole class. Yes, Tommy and Katie were being selfish and thinking only of themselves, making everyone else in the class sad, said Ivy. That's what the Gleams are doing. The magic in the forest is like recess points. Luma and her friends always used the forest magic for the good of everyone. And in doing that, everyone had a great time living here. And the Gleams are doing the exact opposite, added Levi. They're using their recess points, or in this case, the forest magic, only for the things that they want. And they're the only ones having a good time. That's when Levi and Ivy remembered what they did to change that situation back at school with Tommy and Katie. They just hoped it would work to help with the Gleamers. They returned to Luma and Walden, who were waiting patiently to hear if they had any ideas. I think we need to use kindness to deal with the Gleams, said Levi. We need to talk with them and let them know that what they're doing is affecting everyone who calls the forest home. We've tried to talk with them, but they're just so big and loud. It's like they didn't even know we were there, answered Luma. Well, we're big kids and we can handle those Gleams, said Ivy with great confidence. Levi and Ivy smiled at Luma and Walden, promising that they would do all they could. Then they asked to be led back to the Gleams. After a short leaf boat ride across the lake, they were back at the bend in the path where they first saw the Gleams making wish after wish with the forest magic. "Let's go do it," said Levi to Ivy. They gave each other a high five and walked toward the Gleams and all their piles of sweet treats, toys, and gold treasure. "Who are you?" called out one of the Gleams, dropping a giant chocolate chip cookie on the ground. "What are you doing here?" shouted another, tossing a gold bar in the river. "Let me handle this," said the biggest Gleam of all of them as he walked toward Levi and Ivy with a not-so-welcoming look on his face. "What are you doing in our forest?" That's when Levi and Ivy introduced themselves and explained to the Gleams what and who had brought them there. "You're stealing all the magic from this enchanted forest by making wish after wish for things that only benefit you," began Levi. "But while you're doing that, you're also taking the magic away from the fairies and gnomes that live here. Your selfish actions are going to force them to leave the home they love, and they've lived in it for thousands of years," said Ivy. "Do you even know that? You need to think of others instead of just thinking about yourselves." The biggest Gleam stood in front of Levi and Ivy, listening to every word they say. He was silent for quite a while, which made Levi and Ivy question how their conversation was going to end. "No one has ever explained it to us like that," said the biggest Gleam. "We didn't realize that by making our wishes for the forest magic that we were taking magic away from anyone else. But on the other hand, we love all this stuff and it wouldn't be fun to give it up." And just like Levi and Ivy told Tommy and Katie at their school, they didn't have to give up all activities that they liked. They just had to include everyone in the class on making the decision. That way, everyone had a voice and everyone got something they want. So a good way to start would be to give the fairies and gnomes of the forest an apology for what you've done and stop making so many wishes. "Then I think everyone will be okay with you staying here," said Levi as he looked over at Luna and Walden, who were nodding their heads in agreement. "It's not that we want you to go. It's that we want you to stop using all of our magic," said Luna. "And you don't need so much of everything. You'll learn to enjoy things more if you don't have them around all the time, because then they'll be special." The Gleams all realized at that moment that they were wrong, and they had some work to do to make everything right with the fairies and the gnomes that lived in the forest. Walden knew what to do and helped the Gleams to reverse their wishes, which would bring back the forest magic. He helped them send back the sweet treats, the toys, the games, and all the golden jewels, saving only their favorites that the Gleams promised to share with the fairies and gnomes of the forest. "You must believe me that there are so many priceless treasures in this enchanted forest that exist already for all of us to share. Just allow yourself to experience this place without wishes and you'll see that," assured Walden as he talked to the Gleams. And one by one, the piles of things went away. The light in that part of the forest grew brighter and brighter until its enchanting glow touched every leaf and flower that was now shimmering and sparkling once again. Instantly, the other fairies and gnomes felt their magic returning. And when Levi, Ivy, Luma, Walden, and all the Gleams walked back to the plain where they had been waiting, they cheered with excitement knowing the plan had worked and that Levi and Ivy had restored the forest magic. "Thank you! Thank you! Thank you! Thank you! Thank you!" "You're welcome. Very, very welcome," answered Levi and Ivy. "It was our pleasure to help you." Luma and Walden explained what had happened to the group and introduced the Gleams to everyone. They apologized for their selfish ways and made a guarantee that as long as they were in the enchanted forest, it would not take its magic. By this time, Levi and Ivy knew they had only one other thing to do: get their plane back up in the sky so they could continue their trip and see their cousins. "We can't thank you enough, Levi and Ivy," said Luma and Walden. "And now that we get to have all of our magic back, we can get your plane back up in the air and on your way." Levi and Ivy said goodbye to all their new friends and ran up the slide to get back into the plane. Once on board, they rolled up the slide, closed the door, and prepared to fly up, up, and away. Everyone on the plane was still frozen, but Luma said they would stay that way until the plane was safely back up in the sky. So on the count of 3, Luma waved her hands, which lifted the plane back into the sky, and with a swirl of Walden's wand, it zoomed forward through the clouds. Then, only a few seconds passed before everyone started to unfreeze, feeling as if they had the best nap ever. Hello, everyone. This is your captain speaking. It seems that we've flown out of that rough turbulence and won't need to make that emergency landing after all, said the captain over the loudspeaker. We'll be landing normally at our destination in no time, so sit back and enjoy the rest of your flight. Wow, what a great nap, said Levi and Ivy's parents. I feel so rested. That's great to hear, Mom and Dad, said Levi as he and Ivy looked out the window to see the last little trace of the enchanted forest disappear underneath the sea of puffy clouds. So did you two nap with all that turbulence? Or were you still a little nervous? Asked Levi and Ivy's dad. I hope it wasn't too scary for you, added their mom. Nope, not scary at all, said Levi with a little smile. I would say it was magical, said Ivy as she gave her brother a wink and they stared out the window into the wide open sky. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun Lively Lewis story with you.